Welcome to episode 343 of the Tennis Files podcast with special guest Ante Pavic on navigating the ATP Tour, match preparation, and technical changes. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the show. Really excited to bring you this interview with Ante Pavic, who I'm sure at least some of you have recognized this name, as Ante had a career-high ranking of 132 in singles and 106 in doubles. Super high level, obviously. I really love interviewing top pros on the show. Ante also reached the second round of Wimbledon and the first round main draw at the French Open, actually on his first try, which we'll talk about, obviously, in the interview. That was pretty epic. Ante has also won a combined 31 Futures and Challenger titles in singles and doubles, and he is now a tennis coach in Fort Lauderdale / Boca Raton areas in Florida. So yeah, we get into a lot of really great topics today, including technique and, how you should go about changing it and how much is too much in terms of technical instruction. Also, of course, Ante's many epic experiences as a professional on the ATP Tour. Also, how Ante prepared for his matches and how he thought about going about his strategy against his opponents, his thought process, what he did the night before that I think all of you should try doing. How hard it is on the tour to survive financially, and even differences between futures tours in the US and abroad, which is really, really interesting discussion. And also struggling with pressure on the tour, which, as you can imagine, with the money struggles and prizes on the line and traveling and everything is tough. So a lot to glean from and learn from and implement in your game and mentalities. So also a big shout out to my friends Victor and Laith for making this interview happen. They're my USTA buddies and they're friends with Ante. So definitely, the introduction was super helpful. So shout out again. But yeah, with that, I think you'll really enjoy this episode. It was, an hour and 15 or 20 minutes and just flew by. So the good news is Ante down to do another one sometime. So that would be really fun. So with that, enjoy this episode. And without further ado, here's my interview with Ante Pavic. Everybody, welcome to this special episode with Ante Pavic. I'm really excited to have him on because he has such a wealth of experience, having incredible, journey through the pro tour, doing so well there, and then now being a coach, which is great. How we can talk about the dual lives, and I just want to thank you, Ante, for coming on to the show. And how are you doing?
Thank you, Mervin. Appreciate it. Everything is great. Doing great. It's a interesting life now after playing a professional tour, transferring to the coaching and also the family. I have a little kid at home, so that also makes a different dynamics in the life as well. Out of the court, especially, right? So yeah, everything is great. Every day is a learning curve in a coaching, career and being a fighter career. So that's my current situation.
That's right, Ante. Let's see, which one is harder career for you, tennis career or the father career?
That's a good question. Well, for sure, tennis career is a little bit tougher because my kid is now 22 months old. I have a daughter.
Okay.
So nice. So for now, besides some sleepless nights, and or just like 4 or 5 hours of sleep nights, it's pretty easy, But everybody says, as they grow, it's getting tougher and tougher, right? So tennis career, I wouldn't say it's tougher, but definitely more challenges than raising a kid in the first 2 years of their life.
Yeah, for sure, Ante. Have you surrounded your daughter with like tennis stuff yet, like around the crib and all that?
Of course, she has a little
Good.
she has a little racket already for at least a year. Now she's reaching for the bigger rackets and stuff like that. So yeah, tennis balls, stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, awesome, Ante. I usually go chronologically, but I'll kind of switch it up a bit. So, how was the transition for you going to coaching? Was it tough? I mean, were you out there at all, or even now, like you're teaching and you just feel like I just want to like rip a serve and volley, or is there any
Uh,
feelings like that?
it really depends on who you're working with, and I would say like my first students were pretty much like pre-college level juniors, so I felt like very confident I can help them with a
Yeah.
certain tactical points, with a certain mental points and stuff like that. Then later on, I experienced teaching some younger kids and like where you have to be a little bit more technical, obviously. So that's always a little bit tricky because you as a young coach, you don't really know exactly how much in the detail you should go, right?
Yeah.
Technique, in my opinion, is very it's very kind of like um, it's a topic to discuss, really, and like I feel like some coaches are extremely technical,
Hmm.
which is probably not the best in my opinion, and then some coaches are not technical at all, which is also not good. So I think finding that balance is for a young coach really challenging in a way because also you don't have much experience besides your own experience as a player. So yeah, that part is definitely learning curve for younger coaches. I'm talking my name right now. But from the point of view where you're trying to develop some kind of tactical points and the way how finding their identity as a players, mental part, I think that was I don't want to say easy, but pretty easy to actually to transfer my knowledge. Um, so yeah. From that point of view, I would say from the technical part, there's still for sure room for improvement. I mean, there's always room for improvement, but I would say like a technique is always like the part where I like to also discuss certain things with other coaches or my father. In this case, he's like coaching for the last 50 years or so. So or some ex-coaches that I'm in a very good relationship with. So I'm talking to them on a weekly basis and stuff like that. So I always like to hear second opinion about certain things and before I make certain changes or tweaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world, coaching, and yeah, for us amateurs, it's definitely we've developed these techniques that are a little bit flawed one way or another, and then it takes so much time to learn. But like you said, it's very individualistic. With each student, like some people learn better differently than others, and some need
Yeah.
more technique for their goals, other need more strategy, and yeah, and also with the technique spectrum, like you said. Yeah, I know a couple coaches. There's one who I really like, but he's basically like, yeah, techniques. It's like whatever. It's all should be natural, and like he doesn't even like teaching technique. But then there's others who are give too much technical advice, and then you get overwhelmed. So yeah, it sounds like you're definitely well on your way to becoming a great coach,
Mm.
Ante. So I
Yeah,
guess
if I could
yeah.
just say one thing, the one thing that is really interesting to me, like since I grew up, obviously, and been living in Europe, in Croatia, particularly for whole my life, I've been living in the States now for the last 4 years, and the certain things that really amaze me, like to the point where technique is like, um, a lot of coaches, I would say here, are like very into the technique,
Mm,
and I have my opinion about it. I don't want to say that I'm right or wrong, but like I think it's too much. I think generally it's too much, and like I think a lot of juniors here are following certain standards that are very very particular for American way of coaching. And
mm.
honestly, I don't see it. I don't see it generally. I don't see it as a very beneficial for their development. because I feel like a lot of kids are overthinking, focusing only on certain mechanical details, and then
Yeah.
like they're you can tell like they're not playing tennis. They're not enjoying playing tennis. It's like all they do is like they, repeating the shadow swings, and they keep looking at their racket at where, in where they are in, where's the racket in the backswing, where's the racket at the contact point, where's the follow through going, where's the finish ending and stuff like that. And, I was really amazed, compared to where I grew up, and also like not just Croatia, but I've been, practicing in Germany, in Italy, in Spain a little bit and stuff like that. So all that experience that I went through as a junior, I found it not completely, but very different in many, occasions here in States. So, very, very interesting stuff. Very interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Throughout your career, did you have to make any big technical changes? I'm curious, like if you did in any particular stroke or anything.
Um, I mean, besides when I was very little, like changing the forehand grip from basically, continental or whatever, like this,
McEnroe.
strong Eastern to towards the semi-Western. I don't remember changing much. There was
Hmm.
when I was when I ended the junior career, I was like 18 years old, and I was practicing in Germany for a couple of years, and then the coach wanted to change my right hand grip, so my uh, non-dominant arm on the backhand side, right? I'm
Uh-huh.
right-handed, so I kind of had it like more like an Eastern forehand versus continental, right? So he wanted to kind of like to bring it more towards the continental, even a little bit over. So that was like a minor change, I would say. Like it was very little. But besides that, I never really experienced, like major changes.
Wow, and nothing to the serve either that you can
I
recount as
serve
major.
on the serve. Actually, I wouldn't call it major, but I definitely
Hmm.
when I started my
Sweet.
professional career, I realized after maybe 2 or 3 years, I realized that if I don't bring the serve to the another level or to the higher level, then like I'm gonna have very difficult time playing successfully professional tennis. So so in a way, I decided to change the serve. Again, I would call them a minor changes, but
Mhm.
I decided to change certain things with my coach, and it kind of came from me. You know,
Mhm.
like it didn't really came from his incentive. It was like really I told him like, look, now I've been like at that point I think I was 3 or 4 years on the tour, and I had something funky, like I was changing my grip actually as I was going into the backswing towards the trophy position. It's just like I think it was like always like switch the grip a little bit, kind of re-grip the racket.
Mm.
And then I felt like that's actually throwing my my serve a little bit off, because I felt like I'm never accelerating as much as I should have. So I kind of made a little change to the point where I would just like pick the grip from the beginning and keep it all the way until I hit the ball. And then another thing was kind of the rhythm of the serve. I did change the rhythm pretty much quite a lot, I would say. Like when I was 21, 22, I used to toss the ball much higher up to that point, and then I decided to kind of like toss the ball shorter, have a more compact swing without waiting for the ball too much.
Mm.
So that change, again, I would call it a minor change, nothing like crazy where I had to overthink stuff, but it did take probably, let's say, 3 to 6 months to become
Wow.
like a standard serve, like to become very compact. So but like after those 6 months, I would say maybe it was a little bit more like my serve really, really became like a much more consistent, much more dangerous overall, faster and more accurate as well.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll tell you, yeah, great to hear. And I'm really glad that you said that it took like upwards like around 6 months, to change. And I'm curious because it's so hard for, even like somebody like myself. I play like a ton of like USC league matches, things like that, or people play tournaments and whatnot. So how were you able to change your technique? Like even something like that is tough and took a while. Like were you still playing a lot of tournaments, and then you were changing the technique at the same time? That's tough.
I would say like that I didn't really miss many tournaments. Maybe
Wow.
in the first couple months, maybe couple or something, but it was not like one of those changes where I kind of had to, shut off everything and
Yeah.
kind of shut down everything and just like focus on the technique. It was more uh, figuring it out in the practice weeks and then trying to put it all together in the tournament weeks, right? And then, I was ready obviously to because the in my case I knew okay it cannot get much worse.
Mm,
So with the current level of the serve that I had, I knew okay like I could still make some some results which are going to keep my ranking live. But then I kind of felt like okay the time is going to come where I'm going to you know uh, find a rhythm and find a different feel, which I believed that is gonna make my serve better, and then of course, as a consequence, is gonna make my whole game better, right? So again, I think it's in my situation, which is very specific. It didn't require anything crazy like surgical. It was
mm.
more like okay, like working on certain details week in week out, trying to put it all together in the tournaments. Obviously in the beginning was probably not successful, but then I always
Right.
felt like there's a little bit of the improvement
Mm.
from each week, and then on the end, it clicked together. Again, I forgot now it was like 5, 6, 7 months, but I would say around that range. So
Very nice, Ante. Yeah, because thinking about some changes I made to my serve, and maybe like you said, they're a little more surgical or more extreme, but like, in the first, like maybe most of the first set, I say, okay, yes, I'm doing the new one, it's great. And then like you get to like, 6 all or something, and then you say, oh, it's like going back to the old one. So did you ever experience that in the beginning? Like you at first your rhythm was good, but then all of a sudden you went back to the old rhythm, and then you had to like mentally like reset or something like that.
yeah. I mean, like it's especially in the practice, it's always easier to implement
Yeah.
certain things, and usually like it feels good, and like there's certain little details that you notice, like it can be anything from how stiff you're holding your racket or how soft you're holding your grip to the
Right.
to the point that you're feeling your wrists working a little bit better or your legs pushing more or stuff like that. And then normally then in the matches that always kind of like levels out, and it kind of goes back
Yeah.
to the basics. So you kind of learn that okay, like you shouldn't get too excited if certain things go well immediately because because there's gonna be like a adjustment in upcoming weeks. So especially in the tournament weeks. So yeah, it's kind of like okay, like you in my case, like I knew like okay, like I knew it's gonna take some time, but I knew it cannot get worse.
Yeah.
And I knew like it has to get better, and I have to make the change in order to because at the time I was like I would say like 500-600 in the world,
Hmm.
and that's still like a futures level, and you're really not making any money, you're really not gaining anything out of your tennis career. So I
Right.
felt like I really have to get to the point where I can be more dangerous and I can rely on my serve more, because obviously my physical characteristics were like that, right? I'm 6'5", I'm
Yeah.
220 pounds, and like obviously if the serve is not working well, it's becoming much tougher to play successful in the professional in the professional tennis. So yeah, that's it. Like I knew okay, like it's gonna take some time, but I felt that it works well when it's there. It's just like on the first couple months or whatever it was, like it was not there all the time. So yeah, that was my case.
Cool. Awesome, Ante. And yeah,
And
as I
sorry,
mentioned
one more
before.
thing I wanted to
Oh,
say is like
yeah.
on the recreational level is always a little bit different, right? Because the it's that experience, I guess, and the fluidity, natural fluidity, is not there as it is in the professional tennis. So it's kind of like I think you guys are probably overthinking way more than the professional players do. So it's kind of like I think coaching recreational people and like making them understand. Look, you got to trust the process. You got to stick with it. Don't change as soon as
Mm.
something goes wrong. that's a little bit more challenging, I would say, yeah, it's always kind of that mental perspective is always very important when it comes to to changing certain things.
Yeah, 100%, Ante. Definitely very wise words there. It's interesting. It sounded, and I listened to your interview with our mutual friend Devor from Tennis House. Everybody should definitely check out his stuff. A great guy. Um, I heard on there. I believe it's your dad. Was he played and coached handball, or was he just coaching? I'm trying to remember.
He did play as a junior, but he never played.
Okay,
He never played professionally. Yeah,
gotcha,
it was
gotcha.
completely different times back in the day. I'm coming from
Uh,
Croatia. Croatia used to be part of Yugoslavia, and
right.
going professionally back in in 70s or whatever was almost impossible, right? So,
Hmm.
so he kind of like early on in his junior career, he decided to and he played also other sports. It was kind of like those all times where you played not only tennis, but he played tennis was his main sport, but he also played handball, and handball is pretty big in Europe, and not so big in America. He played soccer, obviously, and other sports too. So he was very very all around athlete. So then he decided to pretty much start coaching and work for the club in our hometown.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I was just curious. Handball is a pretty interesting sport. I've seen it, on YouTube a bit, and I don't know if you played, but I was curious if there's any like parallels or similarities between handball and tennis. It seems like the hand-eye coordination obviously is very important, and you got the throwing, which is somewhat similar to the serve, although it's in different plane maybe. But yeah, I was curious if you had any similarities that you think between the two.
I wouldn't. That's a good question. Like I never actually discussed that topic. Not really, because throwing is kind of like obviously like you're jumping and you're throwing forwards or downwards
Yeah,
even.
right.
Um, so obviously, okay, throwing as a throwing generally there is some similarities obviously with the serve, right? But I wouldn't call it that there's too many similarities. Besides, obviously, most athletes uh, that play certain sports for a long time, they do become more athletic, more better movers and stuff, and then for sure that helps with the other sports. If they decide to play recreational tennis, probably they're going to have advantage, right, compared to recreational player who didn't really
Non-athlete.
train much other sports, right? So athletic abilities for sure are making an impact. But in terms of comparing, the tennis with technical part and stuff, like I wouldn't say there's many similarities there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Handball is actually from technical point of view, as far as I understand it, it's very simple. There's not much technique there besides, catching the ball, passing the ball, and shooting, right? Throwing it, which shooting into the goal. There is certain techniques, of course, within those simple techniques, but it's obviously less complex than tennis, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, just curious. It's a pretty cool sport. I've watched a little bit of it. And actually, one of my favorite podcasters, Lewis Howes, he like pretty much got on like the USA Olympic team, or very close to that. But
Mm.
yeah, so one question that I'm always curious about with a professional tennis player guest is, obviously like your career is full of ups and downs and trials and tribulations. I was wondering if there's a particular low point, and sorry to remind you of it, but any particular low point in your career where maybe you even thought like you were close to quitting the tour, and then you decided, no, I'm going to keep going. And I just wonder if you could like maybe talk through like how you felt and what you did to get back up.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, there was a lot of ups and downs, and I always felt like I don't think I ever hit the point where I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm taking like months off or whatever, like anything like that. But of course, disappointment to the point where you're really questioning a lot of things was definitely there. And it's I think it's all really how much I was really into tennis all my life, right? Since the early age, tennis was always my number one sport. even though I played a lot of soccer, for example, like soccer, I loved soccer. Soccer was my hobby sport, but I never really practiced it. Like
Yeah.
seriously, right? I was never part of the club, and I was never playing for this club and stuff like that. So I think since in my case tennis was like number one thing since very early age, and obviously watching a lot of tennis, back in the day, Sampras, Ivan Izevic, these guys, they were my idols.
Yeah.
Um, I think that always stayed with me, So kind of like I remember watching Sampras winning all these Wimbledons and stuff, and I remember thinking, okay, like I would really like to experience playing Wimbledon. That was kind of like probably the thought I had since I was 12 or whatever, 13, 14, I don't know. 2001, Ivan Izevic won Wimbledon. That was like crazy
Crazy.
story.
Crazy.
At the time I was 12 years old.
Mm.
So, so it's kind of like, um, I guess that was always my dream, and I always kept following it. I did think about a college, for example, a little bit when I was end of the high school,
Mm.
but at the time that was like 2006, 2007. At the time, the mentality in Europe was if you go to college, you're pretty much done with the professional tennis. That was
Mm.
kind of that was pretty much the mentality back in the day. So I was never really, fully into it. And then I just, after high school, I pretty much naturally transferred playing, futures and stuff. And with the idea, okay, I really want to go to the challengers as quick as possible, and then catch the, Grand Slams and play the qualities of slams and stuff like that. So my first slam was in 2014. I was 2014, so I was 25 years old, about to turn 25. So it took good. I mean, let's say if I started playing fully when I was 19, I already played some futures when I was 18, obviously, but my first year fully was 19 years old. So it means it took 4 to 5 years to get to that level where you're close to playing slams or close to making any money, right? So it was no even more, right? 5 to 6 years, right? So in those years, going to the futures, obviously financial part was always an issue as well. I couldn't travel much with with the coaches and stuff. I was, finding the way to save as much money as possible. And then, there's a lot of times where you find yourself, alone in the hotel room after some bad, losses or terrible performances. And you are definitely going through some tough times mentally, right? So, but on the other hand, there was also probably, the way to push me to work even harder and get better. And I did feel I have the level and I can play on a, let's say top 200 level or something like that. I just need to find it, and I need more time, So from that perspective, I was always, I never really experienced like a really bad mental state where I wanted to quit.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm very happy about that, because that can be really tough. But but it can also, make you stronger too at the same time. I'm wondering if you could go back, Ante, and then give your go back to when you were like early on the pro tour to your former self, and then give them like one piece of advice. What advice would you give younger Ante?
That's a good question. I mean, it's always easy to go back and be wise.
Yeah.
Once you, that's a good question. Now, like, I have to take a second to think about. I mean, I would definitely tell myself, obviously, to, because there was that mental part of the game where I felt like that I wasn't really, fully mature and ready to, to fight against, certain expectations and that you put as a player on yourself, right? So now looking back, I would probably tell myself to those first 4 years, between after junior career, to go to college, because I maybe, is that part, but now looking back, I think, those 4 years would probably put a little bit less expectations on myself. and would make me obviously more mature. I don't know, would it make me mature as much as the professional tennis did? But kind of basically, I would allow myself like 3 to 4 years just to get more mature, more mentally stable, understand how to deal with the expectations and the pressure, and enjoy the tennis more. So that would be like one thing. The other thing would be whatever you feel from the technical and tactical point of view, um, say it out loud. Say it to your coach. Say it to your coach immediately, because now when I'm looking from the coach perspective, you just cannot. You don't know what the player really think. You know what I mean? You see certain things from outside, but I think the coaches should ask a lot of questions and really get that feedback from the player. Certain things, is it like technical, tactical details that you're trying to work on as a coach, and really I felt like I only started to say the things out loud when I was maybe 22, 23. So I would keep certain things to myself. I knew that there are certain things that are bothering me and like I'm not feeling good, but I wouldn't really express them like that much early on. So yeah, that would be another thing. Just express yourself immediately, whatever you feel. Is it technical, tactical? Is it something stupid, mental? Like I don't like when my father is watching me, or I don't like when my friend is watching me, or like anything that is bothering you, just express it, say it out loud.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And kind of speaking about the mental side, you mentioned that your dream when you were 12 years old watching Goran play Wimbledon was to play Wimbledon, and it was incredible. Obviously first you made the French Open main draw, but then you made the Wimbledon main draw, and you got to the second round. Like, that was pretty amazing. I guess, what was the feeling? And I'm wondering too, like, did you have more of an overwhelm when you played the qualies or when you played like the main draw? Just wondering, like, overall, like, your feelings on the Wimbledon experience, and like after thinking about the dream that you had.
Yeah. So the French Open in 2014 was really a huge thing for me, and I qualified. I played pretty good in the qualies. Last round of qualies I played against Kokinakis. He was at the time 18 years old, but playing really good. And that was probably one of my best matches on clay ever. Like a great match to qualify. And then I played Simon in the first round.
Tough.
On a big court on the Suzanne Le Glen, which was like nothing I experienced until that point. Stadium court, like a lot of people watching and stuff. Yeah. And the conditions were not that great for my game that day. The weather was pretty cold, and courts were wet because of the rain and stuff like that. But more than that, like I really was not there. Like I was not relaxed. I was not playing, enjoying the match as much as I should have. Right? Which in a way, it's understandable because it's the first time you experience.
Yeah.
So that match was pretty bad, especially for first two sets. I think it was like 6-1, 6-1. There was no tennis basically, right? Like so many mistakes. So, I was rushing just too much. And with somebody like Simon back in the day, he was like, I don't know, like 13 in a row or something. Yeah. It was like a self-destructive tennis, and then third set was much better. And obviously, I don't know, I think it was 6-3, and managed to relax a little bit and play up to the level where I could. And then a month later, when I qualified for Wimbledon, that experience actually meant a lot because I found a way to really get on the court, and I didn't play on a huge stadium as I did in a French Open, but still, main draw is the main draw, and being only second main draw in my career, still, of course, you do feel certain, excitement and the nervousness and stuff like that. And but I really got out there, and I managed to just play my tennis from the beginning to the end, and it happened that it was my best, the best match of my life. beating Falha in the straight sets, and Alejandro Falha at the time was really tricky player, playing really well on grass, and I think like just week before he lost to Federer in the finals of Halle, like 7-6, 7-6. Wow. So obviously, it was a very tough draw, but like probably, knowing, okay, like I have nothing to lose. I just got to get out there, play my best tennis, and having that experience of French Open helped a lot. And it was a great match, won in straight sets. And then later on lost to Feliciano Lopez in the second round.
Tough.
Still a
like
decent,
19th.
Yeah. Still a very decent match, but, just much more experienced player on the other side. And score was kind of close, but, on the other side, it was very straightforward match, So yeah, that was my Wimbledon experience.
Yeah, pretty wicked. Yeah, I saw that. I was looking up the draws, which was pretty cool to see, like back then. And Lopez was like 19th seed, and great player. Tricky, I think lefty, but
he came into that tournament. I remember that he came into that tournament after winning both grass court, tournaments. I think it was maybe it was probably Queens and Eastbourne. I think there's Eastbourne after Queens. So, back to back, he won those two. And then he came into the Wimbledon, obviously with winning already two tournaments, which was, obviously, which was, obviously really tough draw. But on the other side, okay, he had a lot of matches, week after week. So maybe, he wasn't as fresh. But I believe he beat, I know actually that he beat Isner the next round.
Oof, wow.
And then he lost. Who did he lose to? I think he lost in a fourth round of 16. But a couple weeks later, I saw Isner at the ATP tournament in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was very interesting because I knew him a little bit. I didn't know him very well, right? But he came to me and he was like, he asked me something about Feliciano's game. He was like, man, like I couldn't read his serve or something, like how was your experience? And I was like, yeah, it was the same. So that was very interesting because John was already like at that time like pretty much standard top 20, top 30 player. So it was cool to see that he approached me at the Newport tournament and just like wanted to chat about Feliciano Lopez game, because we both lost to him in the Wimbledon. Yeah.
Tough.
So
that's really cool, man. For forming the friendships and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so going back to the French Open, actually the qualifying, and again, I heard you and Devor talking about it, and it was nice actually to hear that Kokkinakis was cool about he approached you and stuff. But obviously before that, I'm curious. This is your chance to make your first main draw Grand Slam. And you saved a match point. And I'm just wondering, like, the mentality, did you ever have a thought of like something like, this is my chance, there's no way I'm going to lose the match? Or did you ever get like super nervous? Like, but the same thoughts too, like, oh my God, like, I'm so close. Like, what was the feeling in that match that you almost lost?
So that, those thoughts of and that nervous part where you really close to qualify for some particular tournament that it's in your eyes big, because on the end of the day, it all comes to how do you perceive things yourselves?
Yeah.
Because some players just like show up for first time in their life, they qualify and they make like a quarterfinals or something, it's like for them, you know what I mean? It's just like, that's the, I guess, natural part of having, the mental stability. Probably it comes to the natural. It's kind of like natural to a certain extent. And then of course it's also like working on the mental stuff as well. It's not just natural, right? I mean, Novak made a great comment, like was it last year when he said like, it's like, my mental toughness doesn't really come from just nature. It's like I'm working on it constantly, right?
Yeah.
So in my case, I remember when I played first time, last round of qualies on a ATP tour level. It was ATP 250, in Chennai in India. And I was only 20 years old, I believe. So, the standard for me at that time was like a futures, pretty much. Even challengers were not standard thing for me. So now I found myself in the last round of qualies in ATP tournament, and like going into that match, I'm like, wow, I'm only one match from actually playing ATP Tour tournaments, which obviously was at the time was big for me, and I played Kudryavtsev, the Russian guy who was a very good player, a little bit crazy, had a lot of ups and downs, but when he found his level, he was like really tough to beat. So I lost easily first set, and then in the second set, I broke him very early, and the guy went nuts and like basically tanked the second set, right? So now I remember exactly. I mean, I remember like it was yesterday. Like we sit down, it's a set all, and I remember in my head, I'm thinking like, wow, I'm only one set away from qualifying for ATP tournament, and like I think he took a toilet break or something, so that gave me extra time. Gave me extra time to have like those ridiculous thoughts, and like basically those thoughts just like completely shut me down. Like just, I came on the court and I got, I became like blocked. I became blocked on the court, and like my tennis was not, fluent anymore. I started making double faults, whatever, like a lot of mistakes, stuff like that. And third set went away like within 15, 20 minutes. It was like 6-1 or 6-2. So I went through a couple of those kind of experiences when I was maybe 20 or 21 and stuff like that. I had a very similar experience one more time, probably 2 years later in my hometown, playing in front of the home crowd, also being in the last round of qualies, qualifying for first time in my life for the ATP Tour event. And I was break up in the third set, and I choked and I lost the match, right? Yeah. So that was probably, going back to the beginning of this conversation, that was probably my lowest point, where I remember like I was probably for 3 days, I didn't get out of my bedroom. I was literally, just like, depressed, so going through all these experiences, helped me at that point when I played Kokkinakis to basically not really think about those stuff,
Nice.
Not
easy though.
Not easy, but like, in my case, it was obviously I was working on certain techniques and with a couple mental trainers. One of them really helped me, I would say, to the certain point. But more than that, I believe like you really have to experience, those situations over and over again. Because like, I mean, no breathing exercises, no techniques to stay in the present are gonna make you really stay in the present until you don't go through the certain things for certain amount of times, right? Totally. So in that particular situation when I played Kokkinakis, I remember that I actually remember that when I broke him at 5-all in the third set and I was serving for the match at 6-5, I remember getting out of the chair, walking towards the baseline, and doing like skips, doing like a high knees or something like that. Just like being super confident, super pumped, believing in my, my game, my serve, that I can close this match. And nice. I actually hit an ace on the second serve on 40-15.
Slice or what was it?
40-15 second serve, and he same as today, he likes to move around on the second serve and hit the forehand.
Right, forehand, yeah.
So I kind of predicted that's going to happen, and I told myself, okay, just go slider out wide aggressively, and I hit like a clean ace, on the line. I believe just like he moved a little bit towards the backhand side to open up his forehand, just hit an ace out wide. And the interesting thing at the time, Patrick Moratoglu was watching that match because I was working with the Italian coach Luca Pino at the time. Who used to work for Patrick's academy in Paris. Back in the day, Patrick had an academy in Paris. And then, they stayed in a good relationship, and Patrick, I don't know, I forgot who was he coaching. Maybe he was coaching Serena already back in the day. He was there and he saw that third set or end of the third set. He came to me after the match and he said, man, like, to qualify first time for a slam with the ace on the second serve, that's something. and it's not, it was like 5-0 in the third set. It was like 6-5, and you know what I mean, like serving for the match. So yeah, that was cool experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty sick, man. That's so awesome. I'm wondering, obviously this podcast is to help players improve their game, and already tons of stuff like I think that you brought up, but I'm wondering about like your routines. Did you have any particular routines like pre-match? Like, would you always do like X, Y, and Z before every match or anything like that?
Yes and no. I mean, it was nothing like crazy, that it was like super structured and like, very particular. But like, I did like to, in terms of the warm up, I preferred to hit like probably as close as possible to the match. So that I'm not like waiting for 2-3 hours without any hit and then, just going into the court straight. Obviously sometimes that was not possible. So in those situations, I would just make sure I'm really physically warmed up. I really want cause I was like a big guy. I was a heavy guy, but even, I would say even for the players that are not big and heavy, like, I think, you have certain players that are just slow starters. I was one of those. So I did understand that I really need to warm up to the point where I'm sweating, not just warm up and feel like, okay, I'm warmed, but warm up to the point where I'm sweating, but I feel loose and I can get out there and use those 5 minutes, in the match warm up to get in the groove, so that was probably the most important thing, in my case. The other things, I would like to, like night before the match, I would like to even write down certain things, about how I want to play my match tomorrow according to the opponent that I'm playing against. And then also like obviously write down certain things, about, warm up and when I want to have a meal and according to the, where the match is played. Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon?
Nice.
So I kind of like, I was not doing that all the time, but I found it very helpful at one point of my career because I was, as you write things down, you kind of like visualize, if you write things down of how you want to play the match tomorrow, you basically visualize yourself already doing those stuff, right? So in my case, it was like, okay, like how do I want to play on my service games? What do I want to do with the first ball after serve? What is the opponent's worst return? How I'm going to expose his weaknesses, when I'm serving and how I'm going to, bring my strength to the highest possible level. What I want to, first ball after serve, extremely important. How much do I want to play serve and volley? I was, I like to play serve and volley.
Yeah.
I was not like a serve and volleyer full time, but I like to throw in serve and volley once or twice a game, So, then same thing for the return games. What do I want to do on my return games? How do I want to, when I'm aggressive, what do I want to do with my split step? How committed I want to be to the returns? And then in certain instances, when do I want to go deep and return from the deep position? Because, against the different players, you have to adjust differently, right? Some players like to pick up the balls quick. Some players don't like when they're rushed, right? Some players don't like when you play high and heavy, so really, really kind of analyzing all the stuff and like writing it down. And I found it helpful to the point where it just like, makes you kind of visualize stuff and makes you put a little bit more focus on it and, becomes like clear idea. Okay. Like how and what do you want to do, on the court, tomorrow when you step on, on that, on the court for that match. So, these are, a couple things that I would highlight, like there probably could be some more stuff. For example, eating before the match, I wanted at least 3 hours of the break of no food, even more sometimes, even more, like even 4 hours. I just felt better when I was more, almost hungry in a way, so then like you take a banana or something and you eat a couple bites of banana in the changeovers. I never liked when I felt like my stomach being full, so I guess, it's a learning curve as a player where you really, use the early years on tour and the junior years to really get to know your body and get to know how and when you're playing your best tennis, So, and then in a combination with, with working with a sports psychologist to really get some new ideas to get to know yourself even better. I think it's really important. I wouldn't call it the most important thing, but very important just to, the more ideas and, and tools you have, the more experience you're gonna get out of it, and the more you're gonna get to know what really works for you. So that's kind of like my advice to the younger players.
Yeah, I really love that. I highly encourage people to, try writing down, what they want to do in the match the night before, whenever you have time. Mm. And you reminded me of when I interviewed James Blake a couple of times, actually. Really nice guy.
By the way, one of my favorite players when I was a kid. Like nice. He was like, for some reason, I was just like enjoying watching this guy. It was like, obviously Roger, he was, he showed up around the same time as Roger, right? So, but James, man, like that forehand, like I was, I wanted to watch it all day long. And I met him actually in a Newport, also Newport, Rhode Island, same tournament that I told you where I talked to John. But I think I met him a couple of years prior to that. And I just told him like, look, you're one of my idols when I was a kid. Even though he's not much older than me, but like, just like he was a cool guy. Yeah, super cool guy.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt. What do you want to say about him?
No, I love hearing the stories. It's important and I enjoy it. I was just going to say, like when I interviewed him, he had mentioned that before every single match, he would visualize how the points would go. So he, imagine what I would do in this instance, and it just like was very powerful for him. I'm really glad how you'd mentioned the same. It seems like a theme for some. Yeah, approach. Because
look, on the end of the day, it's really like I remember very interesting conversation with Ivan Ljubicic. Obviously the guy was number 3 in the world, and for the last 4 or 5 years of Roger's career was his coach. Yeah, and I remember remember exactly the point. He had one charity match in Croatia with Ivanisevic. So it was like Ljubicic against Ivanisevic for the charity. Nice. And then bunch of juniors, which I was at the time the junior, were invited to join the event and play some doubles with sponsors or whatever. And then we went for the lunch all together. And then on that lunch, Goran and Ivan, Ivanisevic and Ljubicic, they were just telling a lot of stories from their career, from the tour and stuff like that. And a lot of interesting stories, obviously. First, I'm going to tell one story. What Ivanisevic said, like that was really interesting to me. He said like that he couldn't, he basically couldn't beat Pete in any of the Grand Slams, right? He did beat him a couple times in ATP tournaments, but on the slams he never did, I believe, or maybe he did once or something in the early rounds. But he said like he trained with him once. They did like a practice session on one of the tournaments, and he said like the guy didn't move. The guy literally didn't move for the whole set. Like he beat him 6-1. He beat him 6-1 in that set, and he said like, Pete asked him like a couple of days later, hey, do you want to train tomorrow? And Goran said like, sorry, no, He said like, he was just like that. He was just like very economical in the practice, obviously on the tournaments, right? In the practice on the tournaments, it's completely different, right? Than the practicing in off season. And he had, zero worries about his game. He just wanted to feel the ball on the court and didn't care if he's going to beat somebody in the practice or not going to beat somebody in the practice, right? But now going back to Ljubicic, remember when he was connection to what you said about Blake, how he wanted to have like a clear vision of how and what he wants to do on the court. Right. Very interesting story is when Ljubicic in 2005, Croatia won the Davis Cup, and Ivan beat ridiculous amount of top 10 players that year in the Davis Cup. And first round they beat States. Croatia beat States in US, in LA. And first day he beat Roddick. Next day he beat Brian brothers in the doubles. And last day he beat Agassi. So imagine, 3 days in a row, like, So then in the second round, I think Croatia beat Romania, which also had like Andrei Pavel, who was like top 15, and Victor Hanescu, who was like top 30. So he won all 3 matches. Wow. And then in the semifinals, we played Russia, who at the time had Davydenko number 3 in the world, and Yuzhny was number 10 or whatever, around 10 in the world. Yeah. And Ivan's biggest problem was Yuzhny. He just didn't like the matchup against usually just something about his game that he didn't like. So he said that for that match he prepared certain tactic, very simple tactic of how he wants to play, and he decided to stay with that tactic from the first point till the last point, no matter the score. So he said I lost the first set 6-2.
Still stick with it.
It was far away from being close.
Yeah,
lost the 6-2. But he said, like, okay, I sat down, I reminded myself, okay, just keep playing, just find a little bit better rhythm, keep playing the same way. If you connect the things well, it's going to come. 2-all, 3-all, whatever. He finds a way to break him. And then from that point on, wins straight sets, right? So wins 3-1 on the end, right? Because he was 6-2 down for a set. And, and that's something that it's very important to teach, the juniors and the younger players to really find the identity of yourself as a player. And of course, according to the player you play against, you always have to make certain adjustments, but generally you want to trust your game, right? You want to trust your identity as a player.
Right.
And even if you're losing the set, right? Because just because you lost the set doesn't mean you have to change certain things completely, right? You probably have to, adjust a little bit here and there, but like the base should be most of the time the base should be there, So, so that was like the part when I was listening and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. He lost the set 6-2.
Yeah.
And he didn't back up. He just like stayed with his idea, stayed with his plan, found his rhythm, found his game, and then like just destroyed the guy on the end, So that was one of the learning curves also, like later on for me to really, kind of understand, okay, like what is really my game, in what kind of game is making my tennis the most successful, and how can I implement it, from the first to the last point, So same thing to what you mentioned about the James, right? So.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Yeah. And I mean, like you alluded to, it's very difficult because the natural reaction is like, oh, I just lost this set. Like I need to switch something. But I think, like you said, the barometer that you should, use is like, what is best for my game? What will suit my strengths and weaknesses? Because sometimes it's just like maybe you had the perfect game plan, but you just didn't execute quite as well. But maybe the next set you'll execute, and then, or maybe, this person can't last forever, like how they're playing or something like that, and they'll eventually mess up. So just really good stuff there. And Ante, wow, it's flying by the interview. I had so much fun speaking with you. But in terms of the financial part of it, this is something that especially players who are on like playing futures all the time, like you don't make the money back from your travels and everything. So I was wondering to just ask you, like, how hard was it, for you, and just generally speaking, like financially on the tour, to be able to, keep up with this lifestyle? Because a lot of people who aren't in tennis, maybe they watch a little bit, they don't think about how hard it is. Yeah.
So, living in the States for the last 4 years, I really understood how actually tougher it is to break through living in America than in Europe. Not from point of view that the level is higher. Actually, I think the level is higher in Europe overall, in the juniors and the professionals. But one thing that you have in Europe and you don't have in the States is the amount of the tournaments each week. So, for example, in my case, for example, growing up in Croatia, not coming from a wealthy family and having like unlimited budget, I was lucky enough that I could pretty much travel driving distance to most of the tournaments.
Nice.
And that was like a huge thing because, if you don't have to fly somewhere, if you don't have to really, pay, obviously, okay, I was lucky enough that ex-Yugoslavian area is like, the economical standard is much lower than maybe in Germany and France and Italy and stuff like that. So, the hotels and the expenses to stay and eat were much cheaper. That was like that was a lucky part for me because I was still able to play quite a lot of futures and challengers as well within, let's say, 300-400 miles driving distance from Croatia, growing up in the States, that's honestly, I'm shocked how badly the things are organized here.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I'm really shocked, and it's because you have that rule that it says, each country can have only one tournament per week, right? So now the states states are in that
It's huge.
particular rule, like they're huge, but they're like country, right? State USA is a one country, right?
Right.
So now you have that same rule applying for the states, which is ridiculous. You have one future in Texas. Then maybe next week is another future in Texas, but then there's a week off. Then after 2 weeks, there's a future in Florida.
California.
Yeah. So you don't have you really should have one tournament in Florida. In the same week, you should have future in Texas, and in that same week, you should have one future in California to make the things realistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same thing for the juniors. Exactly the same thing. Like the junior ITF tournaments should be organized the same way. It cannot happen that you have one tournament in Florida and that's it for that week for the whole United States. So now somebody from California or from Portland, they have to fly on the other side of the country, and imagine how much money they have to spend on the flights and obviously hotel stay and then everything, right? So in Europe, that particular thing is way better organized because, sometimes you have in the same week, you have tournament in Croatia, Italy, Austria, Germany, Czech Republic. And basically those 5 tournaments are within driving distance,
Awesome.
So you have five futures in the same week within the driving distance. At the same time, in the States, you have like only one tournament, wherever it is.
Country. Yeah.
So exactly. So, from that point of view, it's like, okay, move to Europe, It's like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, because like if the USTA doesn't change anything, I don't know if there's no will to change anything, or if there is no, just like you cannot work against those rules. That could be the reason too. Then unfortunately, the current situation where you have for the last 30 years, pretty much the best players in the world coming from Europe are that's going to happen. That's going to keep going. Yeah. Because it's just like, it's very logical. In Europe, you have, from the junior point of view, from the ITF point of view, when they're 16, 17, 18, you have 5, 6, 7 tournaments per week. And in the States, you have one tournament per week. You know what I mean? So, and then that same rule keeps going into the professional tennis. So, okay, that's regarding that. Regarding the financial point of view, one thing that was good in the States was that there was a lot of tournaments were providing housing. So I was usually playing in States over the summer between June and August, and a lot of futures and challenges were providing housing for the main draw players. So the costs were a little bit less. Obviously, you just pay the flights and stuff like that, and some stuff like food and racket stringing and stuff like that. But it's it's again, it all varies from the situation to the situation. How much do you really have the help from the family, and how financially strong they are, and can you find some sponsors, stuff like that. It's always like you always have to find a way. Usually I never, in the smaller countries, I never had any help from the federation or anything like that. It was always my family and family friends that we always found a way to find a base, and according to the base that you had, like make a schedule and play the tournaments according to the budget that you have. So junior, I have to say one thing about the federation in Croatia: the junior career was very well organized. Nice. They did help quite a lot with national coaches and paying for certain tournaments, higher ranked tournaments in the juniors, paying the costs of the flights and the travel costs and stuff like that. So that was good. But then later on, when you become professional, you're on your own. So So yeah, it's tough to say anything smart in that particular, for that situation. But on the end of the day, just find like what's your budget, and organize the things accordingly. Yeah. So find a way. Probably the States are better in terms of finding some sponsors or finding some financial help. There's way more. I would say much more money involved than maybe in Croatia or some smaller countries in Europe. But on the other side, everything is much more expensive as well, right? So yeah, that balance is always tricky to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. I've got to investigate. Maybe USC has some agreements with the airlines and hotels or something that they have this. Strange schedule.
I think one thing that would be very helpful to begin with, having more tournaments in across the USA in the same week.
Yeah, like closer. Yeah.
Imagine like if you're based in Texas, in Dallas, and you can play twice a month, you can play the futures or junior tournaments. I'm talking about ITF tournaments, right? The international tournaments. Imagine you can play twice a month within Texas, or maybe within Texas and whatever nearby, Louisiana, nearby. Yeah. Then obviously everything becomes much more easier. But like if you're living in Texas and if you want to play 20 tournaments a year, out of those 20 tournaments, 18 times you got to fly to Florida, California, and wherever, Illinois, then your budget should be like 3 times more probably, right? So
definitely making sorry to interrupt.
Huge difference, and I didn't really get that part until I started living here. But then when I started living here, I realized like, wow, like it's really not easy for the parents of the juniors, that don't have big budgets to make them play really like a lot of international tournaments. It's just not easy. So on the other side, okay, you guys have UTR. America has UTR now being, huge in the last 3-4 years. So they can play a lot of those tournaments, but they are not giving them opportunities to make their junior ranking better or ATP ranking better, right? So they're good for colleges and stuff like that. But So very, very interesting topic, and it would be cool to find the actual answers why there's no more tournaments, across the states.
I think you should be a consultant for USTA, Ante. I think you make some good cash like that.
If they see this podcast, then they can reach out to me.
I'll tag them, man. I'll tag them. Yeah. So I'm actually making a note for that. Yeah. But Ante, obviously, you're doing a lot of coaching right now, which is awesome, and giving back to the game that you love and gave back to you as well. So, what are some of the biggest glaring, I guess what word to use, deficiencies in players' games that you're seeing, particularly if you're working with like amateur players? Like what types of things are they struggling with right now?
Particularly with the amateur players?
Yeah, if you
I lived in LA until 6 months ago, so I did work much more over there with amateur players than what I'm working now. I would say just like making them understand that again the technical part is just like one piece of the puzzle, right? Because I found it very interesting that most of them watch a lot of videos of on YouTube of certain experts analyzing the strokes and you know what I mean, slow, watching the certain shots and strokes in a slow motion and then breaking them down to the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But then they completely forget about maybe the most important thing is like the footwork, right? So, so most of the time everything starts with the footwork, which is the base to put you in a position to actually execute the technical part, right? So like there was like a couple guys that I'm actually still in touch with and very good friends with, that I'm still trying to make them understand, like, look, it is like certain technical stuff that you have to focus on, but it's on that particular shot you were just not there with your footwork,
Right.
Your feet. And if you're not there with your footwork, Roger. I always give them the example of Roger Federer. We can all agree that he's probably technically the most sound player that ever played tennis. But look, when he played against Rafa Nadal and against Novak Djokovic, not always, but a lot of times he was shanking those forehands and backhands, right? How many times did you see Roger shanking the strokes?
Yeah.
It's just because like a lot of times he was not able to position himself well, be in the perfect balance where he can execute his ideal technique, right? And then and then obviously nerves and all the other stuff that played the role as well, because it was obvious that he was uncomfortable playing against Novak and Rafa for most of the time. Right. I always say like he played his best tennis after 2017 and Australian Open, in my opinion. When he came back and when he beat Rafa in that 5-setter. Yeah. To me, in 2017, 18, and partially 19, he played best tennis of his life. Everybody said he was in the prime in 2006, 7, 8, 9, whatever. But okay, maybe he was, in the prime because there was no Rafa and Novak. There was competition, but Rafa and Novak.
But not at level.
Yeah, not on that level. They were, that they achieved later on. So it's the advice is okay, like really put the attention on the footwork and how to position yourself as fast as possible. As much as you put on the technical part, right? And then regarding the technical part, of course, there is for sure, especially in the recreational tennis or amateur tennis, as you say, like there's a lot of things that are obvious that that are missing. But on the other side, it's also tennis is one of the sports. The later you start, the tougher it is to achieve fluent and kind of like natural technique, right? It's just like that's how it is. Unfortunately, that's why this sport is very, very, very tricky, right? It's like very rarely you can see someone who started playing tennis at the age of 15 or 20 or whatever that is going to be very fluent and very efficient in his moves and the strokes, right? So yeah, just it's always the debate that it's tough to win from the coaching point of view because like most of the recreational players always think that they can improve much more if they just fix that one little detail in their forehand or backhand or serve. But the reality is probably somewhere in between, right? It's probably okay, like you probably can improve it, but look, the footwork is most of the time when you're making mistakes, most of the time is not there. So start with the footwork first and then go into the mechanical parts. So yeah,
I love that advice. I was hitting with my friend Kate, who's a very good 5-0 player, and I just commented to her that we have much better footwork on our forehands and our backhands, which is also coincidentally our weaker stroke. And whenever I focus on the intense footwork, getting into position and earlier preparation, it always makes me play better. So it's
exactly,
just a great one. Great tip. And gosh, we only have a couple minutes left. Ante, what's maybe like one lesson that you've learned, through your coaching, like maybe, throughout the, time you learn like, maybe I should change this type of approach that I'm doing in coaching. Has there been any revelation like that for you in your coaching experience?
Actually, yeah, just recently, since I moved to Florida and I started working with a 14-year-old that I'm working right now too. It's kind of like, the understanding that, the professional mindset that it's in me and it's part of me since I've been 13 years on the tour. It's not necessarily always the best, and like it's not necessarily always the most effective with the younger generations right now, because of course then all depends from the kid to the kid. Everybody's different as well, right? Sure. But I feel like with the younger generations nowadays, it's like you really have to find that balance where you can keep them entertained and put the right amount of the hard work as well, so that was like one of the parts where I realized, okay, like the kid that I'm working with is very particular. He's like likes tennis, but maybe doesn't like the tennis to the part where he really wants to work hard every single day and work same exact, the drills and just the quantity and stuff like that. So I realized like maybe in the beginning it was very tough learning curve for me. And I thought like, okay, maybe I'm just not the right fit for that kid. But then I realized, okay, what can I do different in order to match his perception and his level, right? And his understanding at the point where he's 14 years old. So, I think I made certain changes and adjustments from my perspective, from my coaching perspective, which then I felt like, made his tennis better and the process of the improvement made much more, enjoyable. Right. So I think, depending who you work with, you always have to adjust. Of course there should be certain things that it's gotta be there, because I mean, look, if you want to improve as a junior or professional player or something, you cannot go around certain things, like you gotta work hard and you gotta be able to, to ask for extra amount of repetitions or analyze certain things and stuff like that. But on the other side, you also as a coach have to find a way how to make them, entertained, and from the point of view where they are, where they're entertained, improve at the same time, because improvement oftentimes becomes very one-sided, very kind of boring. Certain drills are just like mentally draining, and like you just gotta get out there and like repeat that serve or repeat that forehand over and over again. So how can you really make them have the joy and enough repetitions and the quantity at the same time so they can improve and have the joy at the same time? That's, I think, the most challenging part. So yeah. At this point on, it's very interesting because, that 14-year-old boy like made me really look at certain things differently, and I believe made my coaching experience improve, because I believe to a certain extent I found a way to make him better by make him enjoy certain things more. And then, at certain times I also like, still make him work kind of like, let's say, boring part of the practice and repeat stuff again and again, over and over again. So yeah, that would be my answer to your question. Yeah.
Awesome, Ante. Yeah, it's great how, you got your problem solving and creativity going with that.
Exactly.
And a lot of coaches, they're also saying that you just like really have to adjust to every player, to bring out the best in them. So that's awesome.
True. But the base really should be, look, do you want to improve, and do you want to, what is your goal? Even as a 14-year-old, what is your goal actually? Do you want to play to the point where you can play good D1 tennis in 4 years from now? If that's your goal, okay, then look, these are certain standards that you need to understand. You need to have, so obviously if your goal is just to play casually tennis and be a country club player, then okay, like then then probably you should have a different different approach, or maybe I'm not the right coach for you and stuff like that, right? So yeah, there's always adjustments need to be made, and according to the different players, so different mindsets as well.
100%, Ante. Just really enjoyed the conversation. I know it's pretty much time to end, unfortunately, but I love speaking with you. Is there any particular places where the audience, you want them to connect with you? I don't know if it's social or website, like anything you want to shout out for them.
So I'm that's a learning curve for me too. Like we just talked about it. Like I'm very old school, so I don't have a website currently. I basically have like a social media, Instagram and Facebook, which I barely use. I do post from time to time sometimes, so it's not that I don't use it at all. So yeah, I do have an Instagram. My username is, I believe, Ante.Pavic 89.
Got it.
And I live in Fort Lauderdale currently, working in Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton area. So that's, these are probably the most important, details I need to give. Yeah. And, Instagram and where I work and where I'm spreading my wisdom.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying, there's a lot, but I believe there's a lot of interesting, advices and, experience I can share with the players. Yeah, for sure. Any level. Yeah. So, yeah.
Definitely. That's awesome, Ante. Well, yeah, thank you so much. We'll definitely, put the links for your IG, Facebook, on the show notes page. And, and also, thanks to Victor and Laith too. Shout out to them, friends,
big thanks to Victor and Laith. Yeah. Late is still working on his one-handed backhand. He's working on it. You got to convince him it's a footwork, man. He keeps telling me some interesting stuff, man. Like my pinky finger, if it goes away from the handle. So now when my pinky finger is not holding the handle anymore, I'm not gripping the racket with my pinky finger. That's what it's, the key for my one-handed backhand. So I'm like, okay, that's good that you found it.
I think he needs to record a video for you and send it, but I might see him Friday. I might even play him Friday. Who knows? So I'll definitely relay the message.
Let me know how he sees one-handed backhand. Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay. That's awesome. I love it. Awesome.
Okay.
Ante, thanks so much. Yeah. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure. And we'll be in touch and all the best.
Yeah, we can do this, in the future again, for sure. It's a cool thing.
I love it. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye. All right. I really hope that you enjoyed my interview with former pro and current coach Ante Pavic. I really enjoyed that one. And again, a lot of great advice from this one, and hope to speak with Ante again soon. So thanks a lot for the time. Really appreciate that. And if you did get value from this episode, I would really appreciate it if you leave a review for the Tennis Files podcast at tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts with an S at the end. Or you can leave a review at your favorite podcast app of choice that you use to listen to the show. We just find that Apple Podcasts is the biggest mover of the show in terms of visibility and rankings and so forth. Don't really care so much about the rankings, but more about just pushing out the show to as many people as possible, which Apple Podcasts seems to do the best. So if you're an Android user, then I guess you can't really leave a review there, or maybe you can. Check it out. But in any case, thanks so much. And also want to leave you with a quote, as I do at the end of every show, and this one is by Greet Waits. I hope I pronounced that right. And the quote is, "You've got to look for tough competition. You've got to want to beat the best." Not every UST player is thinking like that, trying to protect their ratings there. But I hope that you can, apply this quote. Very important one to just push yourself outside your comfort zone and play better players than you. And even if you lose, you learn from it and you improve more than you would than if you had played somebody you could easily beat, and then you don't really think about what you can improve because you felt like you played amazing, etc. Also, you may notice a little bit different of audio, quality right now, and I just moved recently, so I don't have my full setup. So I'm rocking with the AirPods Pros at the moment, so I hope that it doesn't sound much, too far off from before, but in any case, I will get the equipment over soon. So it's managing the move and, preparing for the summit, which will be in early April. So really hope that you are looking forward to that one, and, we'll make it as best of an experience as we can. So there you go. Looking forward to it. And with that, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is your faithful host, Mir Banarajad, signing out.